Right, thank you very much indeed. Hey, the best of order in the corner there. Thank you. We'll deal with you later. Good afternoon. It's okay, it's just the Wheel Tappers and Shunters Social Club, which I've always wanted to say in a council meeting, and I am Colin Crompton. Right, okay, so thank you very much indeed, friends, colleagues, and everyone else, and the 10 people who watched the last meeting on YouTube. Hello. I know it's a shock to me as well. I'm Darren Sanders. I'm the Liberal Democrat member for Baffins, North Milton and South Cotner. I'm also the Cabinet member for Housing and Tackling Homelessness. Before we begin, I have to do some fire safety information, so apologies, I'm just reading from a script here. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not use the lifts. Please assemble at the turning circle in King Henry Street due to the ice rink in the Guildhall Square. You can also go in the ice rink if you want, when it's built. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, we're in the building run by the Guildhall Trust. Anyone who signed in at the reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. As I've already said, this meeting is being live streamed, and I need to draw everyone's attention to that fact. So everyone speaking via a microphone will be on camera, including those making deputations. Makeup is available. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. So if your makeup's rubbish, you don't have to be recorded. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. Here endeth the homily. So I will start with introductions. So I will start on my left and then work my way round towards the front so I know who's last. Anna, you're first.
Anna Martin, Democratic Services.
Alan Denford, Finance Manager for Housing, Neighbourhood and Building Services.
Phil Bentley, Head of Estate Services.
Nicola Clanahan, Head of Housing Community Services.
And our two lovely people from the Residents Consortium. I'll explain a bit more for the 10 viewers what that actually means.
I'm Mary Bailey and I'm a tenant in the Portsea area.
Oh.
I'm Greg Anderson. I'm a tenant. I'm a member of the Tenants Consortium.
And you're from which part of our city, my love? My love, I'm now going to get told off because I call everybody my love. Sir, which part of our great city are you from?
Lamport.
God's own country. Right, excellent. Young Mary.
Councillor Mary Vallely from Wimmering and Cosham.
You nearly forgot.
I nearly did the wrong way round, which is well.
The wrong way round is lovely, that's all right. Young Spencer.
Spencer Gardner, member for Farlington and Drayton.
Councillor Raymond Dent, Cotner Ward.
Yes, because there's only one word in your ward, unlike everyone else's. Right, okay, thank you very much indeed.
I'm not sure the residents of Anchorage Park would agree with that.
Spencer, this is not a full council meeting. We should have some level of decorum. Okay.
Apologies, Chair.
That's right. I'll be reading out WhatsApp messages later. Right. Okay. So, do we have any apologies for absence, young Anna? No. Lovely. Does either Ray, Spencer, or Mary have anything interesting to declare that relates to the report ahead of us? No. Thank God. Right. Okay. And neither do I. Okay. So we have one item on the agenda, which is an update on the rollout of waste provision to housing revenue account residents, which actually is more exciting than it sounds. Phil, please present away.
Thank you. Okay, so what I wanted to do is just give you a bit of background before I go into the update on the Portsea project itself. So the council's demonstrated commitment to a greener future since declaring climate emergency in 2020, and this aligns with the Environment Act 2021, which requires all local authorities to collect a consistent range of recycling materials. Portsmouth City Council has a dual statutory responsibility as both waste collection and disposal authority under that Act. So to meet these obligations, Hampshire local authorities conducted studies on waste collection methods, concluding that twin stream recycling, where paper and card are separated from other recycling, was the preferred approach. And this plan was formalised in a joint municipal waste management strategy in December 21. Planning permission for a new materials recovery facility to support this system was granted in 2022. However, the government's Simpler Recycling Initiative, announced in 2023, may require some adjustments to this approach. Secondary legislation is still awaited, and future changes to waste collection infrastructure and services will depend on this guidance. However, the work that I'm going to give you some updates on and carried out to date will not be wasted if there is any changes, as the bins can be repurposed to meet the correct waste streams. So in preparation for meeting these required changes, these legislative changes, a survey of bin sheds at council housing blocks was carried out and identified several issues. So those were things like lack of recycling facilities, poor condition of storage areas, accessibility challenges for residents, insufficient capacity and issues with fly tipping and misuse. So some trials were then conducted at 5 sites across the city to inform improvements to the bin provision and infrastructure, and these trials helped to shape the project that took part in Portsea. So the Portsea Bin Improvements Project brought together colleagues from the buildings, waste and estates teams to address key challenges in the bin store design and usage, and the improvements focused on ensuring storage could accommodate both refuse and recycling bins for weekly collections, enhancing security, accessibility and lighting, providing clear signage to guide residents and collection crews, and creating safer, more efficient collection processes. The goals of the Portsea project were to increase recycling opportunities for residents, to update facilities and make them more functional and better aligned with future recycling systems, to try and deter fly tipping and improve overall bin use, and to enhance environmental outcomes such as reducing CO2 emissions through optimised collection schedules, and to boost resident engagement and awareness of recycling responsibilities. So the implementation of the Portsea project followed a consultation process, including door-to-door visits, letters and resident meetings, and feedback from these engagements was incorporated into the final designs. The work in the project started in October 23 and was completed ahead of schedule on the 16th of February 24. It covered approximately 50 sites in total, and just for clarity, these were all communal housing areas in Portsea. The outcomes of the project was that it was delivered on time, enabled weekly waste collections with improved clarity on bin use, secure bins and clearer signage have made recycling easier for residents, and the majority of residents have adapted well with the new bin arrangements, showing improved engagement with the recycling systems. The learning points from the project were that, unfortunately, at the time that it was implemented came the in-house waste collection services project, and that just posed a few logistical challenges. We don't expect that to be an issue with future rollouts of this project. We aim or look forward to trying to reduce the gap between resident engagement and the implementation. We think smaller phased rollouts will enable more focused communication with residents and better support from the estate services teams. And then initial issues such as overflowing bins, albeit have been addressed, they were addressed through additional provisions and resident education. And the quality of materials used in some aspects of the project will be reviewed to ensure long-term durability for future rollouts. We had some resident feedback, so residents were actively engaged during and after the project, and adjustments were made based on their feedback, including resizing and relocating some bins where possible. Suggestions for improvements from residents did include providing recycling bags for easier transport of materials to the bins, offering clearer communication about the project's importance, and emphasising resident responsibilities in maintaining bin areas. The next steps. The communal housing blocks in the Buckland area have been identified for the next phase of the project. That's scheduled to begin in early 2025. The lessons learned from the Portsea project will be incorporated, including phased implementation approach and stronger alignment between resident engagement and the rollout timeline. And it should just be noted that the changes to twin stream or simpler recycling will not take place until the wider changes to waste collection are implemented. So this is still subject to secondary government legislation. And that's the end.
Okay, thank you for that, Phil. For our two friends from the Residents' Consortium, I'll explain how this works, if that's all right. Which is, I will firstly ask you two for your thoughts and questions, and please have as many questions and as many thoughts as you like. Don't worry. The culture here is to be as open as we can and be as honest as we can. If that's all right. I will then go to the three politicos in the front, for their questions and their thoughts, and then I will do a summing up. Normally, if I have to take a decision on something, I'll then tell people what my decision is. Okay, but I wanted this report to come out so that everybody knew what we were trying to do, if that's all right. So, Mary, as you're from Portsea, which is where
Yes,
all
I
this has
am.
happened,
I was
could
actually
you start,
part of
please?
I was part of the actual trial, the original actually start of it. Now, having had a wander around the whole estate, because I do have a little wander every now and then, on the whole, everywhere seems to be working really, really well. We're a bit of a thorn in Phil's foot, I think, because we've a courtyard, but we've got open ends. So also
Whereabouts
students.
are you, my love?
Frank Judd Court.
Which one?
Frank Judd.
Frank Judd Court. Thank you very much, Mary.
We're not closed off, so people wander through because they class it as a right of way. And we've got students in the area because we're right by the business school, and we've also got a house of, I was going to call it a house of ill repute, house of students next door with about 80 students apparently living in there. But unfortunately, I think they seem to think our bins are okay for them too, and we've done our best to stop it. We can't. Phil's still trying to find out if he can make it any better than it is. He is trying very hard, I've got to say, and he's had to face me all the time, so he needs 12 out of 10 for trying, to be quite honest. But on the whole, everything's going well.
And from your experience, Mary, is what's in the report in terms of what we can take forwards to Buckland and to other
No.
places fair or not fair?
No,
Why not?
it's far too small, far too small. I've got photographs of that bin week in, week out.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear, madam. What I'm saying is that in this report, there's a few things that people have learned, or the team has learned from across Portsea. So everywhere they've done it, not just where you are, but everywhere they've done it. Is that reasonable? Are they reasonable things to take forwards or not? Not just your little, not just your bin, but everywhere across the whole
Going
of Portsea.
around, yeah, it's reasonable, just about everywhere.
That's fine. That's what I was after.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Thank
I'm
you, sir.
positive about it, because I know
Okay.
Phil's been really on it all this time.
That's right. We'll
and
see
he's
if we can
been very
include.
busy.
We'll see if we can include 12 out of 10 for trying in the minute somewhere.
Well, yeah, bless him.
right,
He has to put up with me.
We're not going to include that in the minutes, otherwise we are going to be in trouble. And nor will we include a house of ill repute either. I think that's okay. Sir.
Well, a couple of things. One is we do have sympathy with you having to work around the response to changing and delayed legislation, which doesn't make things any easier. We appreciate that. I'm wondering what support is there for residents with mobility issues in terms of getting the items to the recycling bins, and what effort is being made to reach the people whose first language is not English to know what they can and can't put in the recycling bin and what is wrong when you put the wrong thing in the bin.
So, sir, thank you very much. The first question is something that we've discussed previously at various fora, so I'm hoping there's a straight answer. And as for the second one, I've not got a clue. Phil.
Sorry, I got stuck on the second. What was the first bit? You say again.
So it's about people. It's about how do we handle people with physical disabilities
got it.
and a struggle to get to where the bins are.
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry. So, with the project, there's just a lot of engagement that ahead and during. And what I can tell you for the whole of Portsea, we've only got two residents that we've identified that need support, assisted support, to take their rubbish out. And what we've done is that's been reasonably new to estate services, but not new to the waste collection teams. But there's a housing role and a waste collection role here. So for estate services, we've set up a time and date or day of the week to do these collections, and we meet the residents, we take their waste out, and we give them their containers back. That's basically it. So out of the whole of that project, we found 2 for assisted collections. Do you want me to answer the second bit?
Yes, please.
Languages is, again, we just identify that as we're going with the engagement piece. So when estate services are interacting with the residents and they recognise that there is a barrier, we've got options with the web page, we've got options with our letters. We haven't had to go down any sort of language assistance at this time, so it's there if we need it.
Yeah, and going forward, you think that you'll be able to cope with that, both with the mobility and with the language? Because obviously it's a small, as you say, you've only found a couple of people. In the bigger blocks, you're going to find more. We might. I think we're fine with it set us up well for sort of expanding the project, and I also think the phasing aspect will give us, far more clarity about what those residents need in a more condensed period of time. So I think if anything, it'll make it clearer what steps are needed. Thank you.
Not at all, thank you. Mary.
Does this include food recycling? Yes. And
Phil,
what-
sorry, could you, so for people who may be hard of hearing, could you put your microphone on and answer the same 3 letters you answered just now?
Yes.
And you haven't really reported anything on food recycling, and I know that in Cosham it's an issue. I know that people aren't doing it because they won't pay for the bin liner.
I think we're going to look into that one for you. That came up in a different meeting, so I have referred that to the local estate operations manager just to see if we can get more sight of the blocks that you're referring to. But the process of engaging with residents when we're identifying that the bins are being misused and there are opportunities to redirect that waste, that's there and working really well. And actually, I think from where we started back in sort of March, April time with this project in Portsea, 2 months down the line, residents really have had to buy into the disposal routes available to them, because what Mary was sort of alluding to is there is a reduction in the offering because of the need to try and get it into the right container. So we might see that that is an improvement in Hawthorne and Highbury areas.
Also, very loud, mine. Why are you going straight to Buckland and not up to the north and making it alternative? Turn about.
I don't exactly know, actually. I think that's just where our energy went whilst the project was away. So we've gone Lamport and Buckland in terms of getting organised. That makes sense to me in terms of it's a high concentration of communal housing blocks in those areas. So I think that's okay at the minute, but that's where we're at.
I'll be keeping an eye on you because I need equal, time, equal of your time in the north and the south.
If I can just answer, I think what I'd say is the processes are in place across estate services holistically. So if there is an issue, that's why your bit about Hawthorne and the issues with the bins, the procedures now are across the service, so we can implement that. What we don't have is the upgraded bin areas to cope with all the different outputs. But there is food waste and there is normal recycling and there is refuse there. So the officers will go and do their investigations and still engage with the residents, but you're also awaiting for the upgraded bin areas.
I think, Phil, it's one of the issues that permeates various debates when there's 42 of us in the same room gassing, basically. And that is around what is the north of the city. So all 4 of us represented parts of Portsmouth North, which you would normally describe as the north of the city. However, we recognise that there is, for some people, the north of the city is the mainland and not the island. So it's a bit elastic depending upon which issue occurs, but it is an issue that, you know, we as an administration are very sensitive to across everything. Buckland is, of course, in the north of the city. It's just on the island. So I think that may, so Mary, I think that may be one of the issues going forwards, which essentially is where the Paulsgrove Housing Office gets into all this, because that covers everything in your ward. But it's a fair point. So Phil, it is an issue that permeates it from time to time, and we want to try and be fair to everybody. But there is a difference as to what the north is, depending on what it is. But if we can be sensitive to that going forwards, that'd be lovely. Here endeth the lesson. Spencer. Oh, hang on. My management. That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for noting that. Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. 4.1, first point, ensure recycling and refuse bins for weekly collections could be accommodated. 4.2, fourth point, improve environmental outcomes, reduction in collection frequency can save X. How are the two reconciled? Was it an objective to reduce the number of collections or maintain them? I'm just slightly confused by that part.
It's about having a capacity on site that can cope with a week's worth of waste for one collection rather than two in the week. That's the only difference. So therefore, a vehicle only needs to go out the once to the site rather than multiple times. That's where the saving in emissions is.
So rationalising and organising rather than reducing the number of collections that's taking part.
If you like, it's the same amount of collection capacity, but done in one time rather than two.
So no reduction in the actual number of regular collections, planned collections.
There is a reduction in collections because
In planned collections, so the regular weekly collections that you'd anticipate, or that were taking place on a regular planned basis prior.
I think the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Volumes are the same.
There is no change to weekly collections whatsoever. Because we know in the past that has been highly sensitive and the source of 177 rows in this chamber and 12 million leaflets and 13 million social media posts.
Yes.
So, no, there's going to be no move towards fortnightly collections, which other councils of all political persuasions have chosen to do.
Yep.
However, you collect it when it's there. I think that's what Phil is trying to say. Is that right?
No, sorry, just to be clear, this is communal blocks. Sometimes, depending on the size of the building and the needs of it, it might have had previously 2 collections in 1 week, for example. We're just doing weekly collections now, and the audit that took place was about the volume that should be offered at the communal sites for that for the correct stream of waste.
So is that, so in terms of that being a reduction in service and the number of collections, and I think one of the residents raised the issue before in terms of smaller bins, has there been any residents' feedback in terms of bins overflowing, bins smelling, because they're not being collected as regularly? I can clarify that if that helps. I appreciate it's fairly complex in terms of what I'm trying to convey. I'm looking at levels of service delivery and any complaints that might have arisen from residents in that respect.
So I think to answer your first question about the reduction in emissions, that's just because one vehicle is doing one collection at a site per week.
It was more to do with what's actually being delivered on the ground for residents, and if there's any complaints coming from that, because I can see a scenario where the service that's being delivered to residents would remain the same, but you could reduce CO2 emissions by rationalising the service and tidying it up. But what I'm trying to get to is at the other end in terms of the number of deliveries to residents, and as the chair touched upon, those complaints and grumbles that the waste isn't being collected as often, it's smelly, the bins are overflowing. Has there, as a result of these changes, been any complaints in that respect?
I think the answer would be yes. In the early days, there was some complaints, and the nature of the estate is that depending on how those provisions are used by the users, we can end up with what we call side waste, and that's where the investigation linked to that with my team will come in about trying to find out, could those materials have gone into different bins that are provided on site? You know, why did that happen on this occasion? Well, you know, some people might have a large gathering, or they might be a bit like Mary's situation where they're not even using the bins that are intended for themselves or their communal area. They're misusing other people's bins. So the answer is there are times when that happens. It's live, and that is correct. But in terms of the offering that we're providing, they're getting the correct volumes offered on a weekly basis, and there's no reduction in that in its operation. So the collections are happening as they should. The volumes of collection being offered are correct, but nature of the estates are that there will be times when what we'll call as side waste needs to be investigated and followed up on. That's pretty much it.
But presumably there were similar complaints to the system before in terms of those particular issues, is that right?
There would have been, but in terms of changing some of the sort of users' behaviour and education, it's about making sure that it's going into the right provision, so the right recyclables end up in the right place, like food waste or paper and card, for example, just so that those items aren't taking up capacity in the other bins, which it isn't intended for.
That's helpful. Second question, which is more straightforward than the first. The simpler recycling provisions that you spoke about at the outset, you helpfully explained that actually there's some resilience in the current process because the current bins can be repurposed. Can you give a brief overview of what's anticipated, or is it just so uncertain at this stage it's difficult to know what might be coming down the line?
I can't give an overview, it's not my area of expertise, but what I've discussed with colleagues in waste is what are their concerns, and they and we therefore are confident that what we've put in place in Portsea, albeit might need slight refinement, the bins that we're putting in place, if they need to be repurposed, can be. So we won't have any wastage in what we're offering, it will just be rediverted in a more holistic way.
I'm grateful. That's all. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, officers.
Thank you, Spencer. Ray.
Most of my questions have already been asked, but just to clarify, the size of the recycling bins you're using now, are they the same size they were before?
They vary. So in some cases there's more, especially with the recycling. Excuse me. So in most cases we've reduced the refuse bins but increased recycling.
I think it's just more of a clarification rather than anything else. During the trial, how often or how badly were people using the bins, i.e. recycling going in waste and waste going in recycling? Was there a problem with that, or was there very little problem with that?
The trial with the 5 sites, it really comes down, so yes, there were all of those things were there. We would have things put in the wrong bins, but sometimes misuse, bulky waste and so on. But because it was in a concentrated area, what we were able to do is learn what the residents needed. So that's what led to good signage being put in place, well lit bin areas, areas where people felt safe to go to them and use those bin areas, clearly marked up bins and what they're for, and a strong engagement with the residents at those sites to make sure that they were aware where their bin sites were, what should go in each one. But it comes and goes. Even in Portsea, it's definitely improved. But sometimes we'll have a little flash up of a block of interest, and then they'll work through those problems and just re-educate and just keep putting that persuasive element to it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions to Phil that relate to what's been said earlier. Okay. The first one is with regards to Mary's point around food waste, which I think is a valid one, because that tends to be quite difficult for lots of people to do. What steps are in place to encourage people to recycle food waste? Mary mentioned the right sort of bin bags and all that sort of stuff. So I'm assuming that that's all in place. Am I right?
Do we provide the bin? So each resident's provided with a small caddy, which you can fill. You don't have to use a bag. You can rinse them out afterwards if you want to. That's quite easily done. And then the idea is they'll tip them into the communal bin. That will vary in size depending on the size of the block. The communal bins should be lined just because it keeps it a little bit nicer, because, you know, naturally a large bin of food waste can be a bit rotten.
Smelly, I
Yeah.
think is the word you're trying to
But
use, Phil.
Yeah, but the engagement is the same, really. So it's more about trying to persuade people of the benefits for putting it where it should go. So again, although you wouldn't imagine how much food waste you might put into a communal refuse bin would impact it, but if there's 20 residents at the same building doing the same thing, it will have an impact. So we'll just try and persuade about why they need to put it into the food waste bin, what benefits that brings us environmentally, and why we'd like them to buy into that. That's what's in place. The food bags, we don't sell them, but they are available in most shops, even the small sort of co-ops and so on, so easily obtained if they're needed.
I think, can I suggest that going forwards we might want to look at actually doing the same thing as they do with the streets food waste recycling, where I believe that there are some bags that are given out to people. I think that could be quite useful.
I can look at it.
If you could, that'd be beautiful. Because, well, I mean, we as an administration are quite proud of the fact that we trial food waste recycling in places like Southampton didn't. And what we found, and this all happened before the three of you became councillors, so forgive me if you don't know, we found that CO2 emissions were cut by 20% based upon what they would have been if they'd all been chucked in the black bin. So it actually does help us meet our the city's wider climate emergency goals quite well. So that's why that thing actually matters a bit more. And we know that if we are to drive up recycling, which is one of the reasons why this is here, then we have to make sure people on council estates do it as well as people in middle class areas, because that's absolutely important if we are to honour our climate emergency goals. And that's one of the reasons why this is here. I wanted to make one comment. Spencer mentioned rightly simpler recycling. I'm looking at my Labour colleague here. I think both of our parties, how can I put this diplomatically, Mary, didn't think it was a good idea. So I think Phil and the team are right to say that we're awaiting secondary legislation. I have a feeling the secondary legislation is in the circular recycling bin under the desk that is emptied on a daily basis. So I don't think it'll happen, but you're right to be cautious about it. And I look forward to a yes or no answer from this government as to whether they will say no to a scheme which was done with very good intentions. But I think those of us at the time who were looking at it thought it was one of the more suboptimal decisions of the previous government. So good luck if you see secondary legislation, in my view. But if you do, I'm glad that we're there. It is something that boosting recycling on estates really does matter, because to my mind, recycling is not purely for middle class people and people with money. It's got to be for everybody. And that's why we're doing it. I think it's right that we're piloting it. I think where Paulsgrove is in this particular lineup will be important, I have to say. But we've moved from the south to the north of the city by doing it through Buckland, which includes parts of Hilsea, includes parts of Ray's ward, includes parts of my ward as well. So I think we're doing the right thing. And I'm pleased that we're picking up some learning points. I'm also pleased that Mary from Portsea, I'm not saying representing the whole of Portsea, because she never did that, has been, aside from fighting her corner with the House of Ill Repute next door, has reflected what I've certainly been picked up, which is a wider sense. This is a good thing. There were some teething troubles. They've now reduced. And I think some of the learning points going forwards are very good. And that's why I wanted this here, just because we as a council are committed to tackling the climate emergency in every way we can. So I think I'm not allowed to take a decision with this report, but I think it was a good thing. And particularly if you pick up Mary's comments around the bags and the white bags for food waste, that'd be lovely. Is that all right?
Yes.
That's the right answer. Okay, that's excellent. So we have one item on the agenda, colleagues, which is pleasant, and we stretched it to 35 minutes, which is always nice. So on that basis, I close the meeting at 4:36. Thank you very much, and have a pleasant weekend.